Alright, so I'm ready to start on part 2 of this, working on the image tagging for GitHub Actions for Docker images. I've been doing some thinking, and if you have a normal Docker image, not a multi-arch image, but just, regular image, you're able to re-tag it. So once you build it, it exists locally on your machine, and then you can just say docker tag, give it the image that you built, and then provide another tag. And in that way, if you have a tagging strategy where this image that I just built was like, say, version 1.5.0 of this product, you could create several tags that point to that same image. So you could create the tag with 1 and 1.5.0 and 1.5, even latest, or whatever you wanted to do. And the digest of that image would also be the same for all those tags. With multi-architecture images, the image, when you build it without pushing, does not exist locally. It stays in memory. And actually, I think there's a container that's spun up for BuildX that actually builds the other images, and that container is then torn down after the build is completed. And there's no easy way, because if I were to just say docker tag like I would with a normal image, if I were to do that with a multi-architecture image, it only would tag the image that matches the architecture that I'm currently on. Which means the next approach would be to do something like use the API to grab all the different digests and then create a manifest with all of those digests and push that manifest, which is another tag. Alternatively, and what I don't know for sure, is BuildX going to automatically, if you give it a different tag, if the Docker file hasn't changed at all, is it going to entirely use the entire cache and basically do all that for you? So I'm pretty sure that that's what's going to happen, but I'm not actually positive. I'm going to give it a shot. I was actually looking around at some official images on Docker Hub that have like this multi-tagging strategy, and Node's a good example. So Node has probably, I'll show you here. So they've got, if you look at this 14 stretch image and 14.7, so stretch is the default distro that it uses, and you can see that the digests match, and they're not doing anything with the API, I don't believe. I think it's actually what the Node repo does is those builds are passed upstream to the official registry, official images registry or repository, and then Docker builds those. But it got me thinking, because, sorry, I got something in my eye. If we do, there's two approaches here. The question is, do you really need a matrix, and do you need to run all the steps again and again and again, when really you don't really need to build another image, you just need to tag an image. Now, for a normal image, you could actually get rid of the matrix, and this action could be give it the input strategy, and then the input would be the output from the build, the tag that you used, or the job ID, or something like that. And whatever reference you're giving it for the tag, say you give it a reference of 1.5.5. I meant to show this. sorry, what I was saying here earlier, you can see that the 14.7 dash stretch digest matches, say, 14.7.0. Anyways, forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah, you wouldn't actually need to do another build. You could just do all those tags, and so in that case, you wouldn't be kind of creating another. You wouldn't need to create another context. Now, with BuildX and multi-arch images, you may need to redo all the steps, but if you're using cache correctly, it may not actually add a lot of time, because the if you do BuildX and cache is used and there's no changes to the Docker file, the command takes like 2.5 seconds to run. And the big question is it going to produce the same output, like where the digests are the same for different image tags, because it's the same image. So ultimately, that's the goal, is to give a strategy either via matrix or via the action, the step itself, and to produce multiple tags originating from the same Docker file, so that you have like your tagging strategy that follows, so that users can follow whatever makes sense for them. If they want a very specific tag, or if they just want to make sure that they use, it's kind of like doing dependency management with like Node or Python or anything else, where you would say, give me major and minor for Semver tagging, and automatically update unless there's a breaking change. So if you were using, like, say, version 1.2 of a dependency, it would pull in any 1.2.x version, and or really any 1.x whatever version until version 2. And even though version 2 would be published, it'd still only pull in the highest version 1 builds. So I'm still going to continue on the course I was taking before, because I don't really have the answer to, I think if we do the manifest approach, it'll work. It's a little more complicated, and that could be a good version 2 target for this tool, where you can tell it to use a cache or manifest to create these tags, in which case it would create every tag in your tagging strategy, and you pass a strategy into the action instead of doing it in a matrix. For version 1, we'll just assume that it'll take an input. You give it an input, and it'll parse based on your strategy output. So we'll continue down that path. One thing I think that may have changed as I was thinking through things last night. So this is an example usage that we've got set up so that we know what to code to. What you're going to get if you're given a tag, I think you're only going to basically use this step if the image is release or pre-release. So this isn't probably something you really need to do if there is if it's not a release or pre-release. Otherwise, because otherwise you're just building like based on the job ID or the build number or ref or something like that, and you really don't need a parser to create a strategy for that. So what I was thinking is that for your image tag strategy, just like we have here, if the github.event name equals release, you'd have the tagger pattern, and each iteration, so you would just have like x, x.y, x.y.z, and the input for this would be the github.event dot release or dot whatever dot tag, and it's going to output 1 or 1.1.1 or 1.1, etc. There's one other thing I was thinking. It might make sense just to be able to pass it your own custom input as well, instead of like having it look up a payload key, for you to be able to just pass in a string and have it parse based on the iteration of the strategy that comes through. For now, we're going to keep this and we'll see what happens. So let's actually get to the point. We've got, I think, enough written for documentation where we can actually start writing some code here. So I'm going to transfer over to our code. And I've actually expanded my workspace here so that you can get a sample. So I've got 3 projects. So I've got the image tagger project in here, which is the action that we'll be using. And then I've got Octoprint Docker and the Octoprint project. And so all of these are going to, the Octoprint and Octoprint Docker project will be where this is first used. And let's see, my other screen, I'm just pulling up GitHub creating actions documentation. So far what we've got is our README, and we've got our index.js. And I'm going to open a new terminal here, and this will be Okay, so the first thing we'll do is we'll add Semver Parsing. So if you remember from yesterday, one thing I wasn't sure about is if I could just publish like a node module as an action, or if I would have to package that in a Docker file. Either way, it doesn't really matter, because if I do it as a JavaScript action and it doesn't work using my dependencies, I'll just create a Docker file and we'll build it and then publish it as a Docker-based action. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to install Jest as a development dependency, so allow me to test it without actually test the certain pieces of it, so that I don't have to publish it, just to make sure some of my intended input's working. Just gonna merge this real quick. I like these merge requests that are just, they have one purpose, and that's really the only reason I'm doing it. Sometimes it's a pain to do that, but in the end, you're never sorry. And one other thing, step that I missed yesterday was to create the action.yaml file. Or I created it, but to actually set it up. I think the moment that I actually add stuff in there is when it's gonna say it's available as an action. So even though the GitHub docs say to do that, like in their little basic walkthrough, they have that being like the one of the first parts. I'm going to wait to do that because I don't want it to actually be available as an action until I can do these things. So this is where I'm getting these object filters. I'm getting this from the payload. So I'm hoping that that works. Node 14 can kind of do that anyways. I'm not really fighting the docs so much. I'm actually going to get into coding here. I was just double checking something. Welcome to the stream, Jim. Good to see you again. If you have a chance, go watch the intro, because I had a couple thoughts based on some things that you were saying yesterday. And drop back in. version 2 might be significantly different than version 1 of this thing, basically, but I have to do some investigating on the best ways to do some tagging of multi-arc images without rebuilding. But for version 1, we're just going to assume that every tag output equals a build, has an accompanying build command. Okay, so let's go back over here, and the next thing that we want to do is set up Semver Parsing. Add Semver Parsing. Whoops, I should probably... Did I pull master? Yes, I did. So I do have just as a dev dependency. So for next thing I need to do is just find a good Semver module on npm. This is going to be the one that I'm going to want. With 81 million weekly downloads, I'm pretty sure that this one is used directly with npm. So let's go ahead and add that dependency. Okay. In my other screen, I'm opening up the docs again for creating actions, just to see index is the entry point, core get input, catch. I'm assuming it just runs index. Yeah, it just runs index as the action or whatever you tell it. So we'll come in here. What do we need from Semver? I'll just come up here, const Semver. So the next thing we need to do is get the payload, and that comes from, payload comes from github.context.payload. Actually, I'm going to put that right at the top. not sure why we'd want to stringify that. That's what they have in their example here. I wonder if there's test mocks for GitHub Actions. I mean, Jest will mock it. I can auto mock, and that may be an option because I don't necessarily want to actually trigger stuff to try this, especially since triggering this will require let's see, I'm going to go back to the docs real quick, and all I want is an example. I'm checking the context. This is interesting. So github.context.payload. So this must be inside my code where I'm using github.context.payload. And there is no payload context. So what I'm thinking is that github.context.payload works similarly to module.exports with Node, if you're familiar with how CommonJS works, where you set exports to be whatever the module is, or you set. So if you were to actually look at the tree, it would say modules dot and then whatever the name of your module is. And so github.context.payload I think is going to equal, you're going to get all of these things, most likely, or you're just going to get the payload. So say that we're doing a the event that triggered it was a release. And this is the release payload. So I'm assuming that this is what you'll actually get in there. So if we're in our action, we could say github.context.payload .release .tag name. Thankfully, I think working with the actual code is going to be a lot easier than working with the syntax in YAML. As much as I don't want to publish this to try it, I think I am going to try it. So we have our core set output would be tag. Hey Jim. Yeah, if you have any thoughts, toss them in the chat. And I'm going to console.log the payload. Just so we can see what we can see. So this is going to require me to complete this action.yaml file. And so I have added a console.log to the payload. And then I'm going to actually finally fill out this action.yaml screen. I guess we'll find out two things here. We'll find out if it uses, if I can actually refer to I'm also going to do Semver. And so all that should log is that it's just a function. So this will tell us if we have to build a Docker file or not. So I'm going to merge that, and then the last thing I'll do is just create that action.yaml. Okay, so now I'm going to add our action metadata, and this I'm just getting directly off of that creating actions doc, so I'm not going to pull that doc up. I'll just explain what I'm doing as I go along here. So our action name, so here are the inputs that we need. We need name, description, inputs, outputs, and runs. And then these will have, so for each input name, I think we said that there would be, let's pull our README out to the side here. Inputs, there be pattern, and there be payload key. And for each of these inputs, we need a description, we need whether or not it's required, and defaults. Nope, no dash on this. This is an object. This is a scalar. And then for outputs, it's the same. Well, not quite the same. And runs will be using and main. And that'll be index.js. So default here, we said that this would be default pattern will be x.y.z. Description and payload key would be the and we'll put this as github.event.tag. I don't like this image tagger name. You may have to change this. Maybe time. It may be time. Description. I have a good description already set. Build tagger. I kind of like that. So there's nothing in here that's actually going to require Docker, but it's more for maybe tagger strategy. Tagify build. Okay, tag extractor, tag refiner, Keep coming, keep coming. You're onto something. What about tagging strategy? I'm going to go with tagging strategy for now. I'm still open for suggestions, so if you come up with something that's cool. Yeah, I'm the same as you, Jim. At least for something this practical. For example, there's a side project that I've been envisioning for a while. If you can see my workshop here, I've got all these different parts bins above and below and to the side, and then I've even got a whole closet full of parts. And I mean, I've been collecting these things. Focus, come on. There we go, maybe. So anyway, I wanted to create a system where I could, almost like an IP address, log where each component is stored using like a, it would almost look like a MAC address. And it would also track like what type of component it was, stuff like that. And so I wanted to call it my EIDB. Which stands for My Electronics Inventory Database, and it just kind of comes off, it rolls off the tongue. So like My EIDB, I don't know, a little bit of fun there. So, okay, back to Dragon Order. It was a. I'd have to. You'd have to tell me more. So we're gonna go with tagging strategy for now, and I'm actually going to change the repository name also. And I learned that GitHub now does automatic redirect, so I drag and drop. I gotcha. Okay, I like that. That's fun. I wouldn't even necessarily have to remap my remote here, but I don't know. I just need to. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. I say it still qualifies because it's punny enough to say what it does. So we're going to push this. And I'm going to double check the docs here just to see if there's anything I missed. I'm pretty sure that this, I wonder what JSON stringify parameters are. I'm pretty sure that I forget what the middle one is, but I think the second one is yeah. Yep, okay, so that's just spaces. So I really don't need to mess with those. We'll just use json.stringify. So I've got that pushed, and let's see what's next. So I actually need to commit the node modules directory. That doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense because they're probably saying we're going to add everything here and they don't want to add extra time. But if that's the way that works, I'd almost rather, well, I guess with a Docker file, you'd be doing the same thing. So yeah, I did miss something. So apparently with actions, you need to commit node modules. So that's definitely new. So I need to there's a way I could add a .vs code folder and make sure that that extension warning was ignored for this project, and I probably will do that. Or maybe even submit it back to, there's a plugin that I installed for GitHub Actions. Might contribute that to that, but let's stay on topic, and we'll git add.gitignore. This feels so wrong. It's just, it feels so wrong to commit node modules. I mean, look at this. This is why I always need someone watching me so that I remember to swap screens. I mean, there's so much stuff here that my scroll history is, and I think I have like 1,800 lines that'll go in my scroll history, and it's more than. Plus, I've got jest in here, which isn't needed in the action. So I wonder if there's a way where I can Yeah, I'm using OBS. But, and I know what you're going to say, there's a tool in the tools menu for automatic scene switcher, but I don't know if it's Linux or what, but it's not working for me. And it may be because I'm on Linux. I've had other issues with that or not. I just haven't had time to look into it. So right now, my goal for this weekend anyway was to get the stable builds running for Octoprint Docker. And I could spend all day like screwing around with OBS. If you've had that issue and you know how to fix it, or you know of a resource where it details how to fix it, or you want to do that research for me and then send me the link for the, any irrelevant links, I'd be happy. I wonder if there is a way, I'm sure, where I can say ignore jest, because I don't need jest. Okay. Advanced scenes. This is from 4 years ago. This is before OBS was OBS Studio. So that's not going to work. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to stay on track here. I'm just going to hope that this get ignore pattern that I put in here works, just to exclude jest. And I will I just don't like that. Check something real quick. I see. So one of the actions that I've been using is this Docker buildx action, and I went and looked at his repo just to see if they commit node modules, and he does not. Not exactly, anyways. So it looks like what he does is he actually does a build and basically munges it all into one JavaScript file, which is undoubtedly going to be faster. So I may wind up doing that as well in another version. I'm betting if I go back to his releases, like version 1 or something like that, he probably committed node modules also. Nope. Anyway, gonna go back to, or let's see. Okay, here it is. As an alternative to checking in your node modules directory, you can use a tool called XiteNCC to compile your code and modules into one file used for distribution. Did I push this? Git reflog, one line. It does not look like I pushed it, which is good. Let me double check that. Okay, yeah, it's just local, so I can actually so I'm going to try this XiteNCC thing. Am I running node via Docker or NVM? Okay, NVM. So I will do npm. I've actually seen this used on other projects that I've considered before. My git ignore, yep, has node modules in it, so we're good there. Only thing is that this is going to add jest, which I don't like, but whatever. For our, so this will be dist index.js. I'm also going to change the package main. Whoop. I'm going to change that. Okay, so I've pushed that up. Yep, see you, Jim. I'm I've went ahead and installed the Zeit NCC globally, and then compiled everything and created this dist index.js. And now I am going to create a tag. Okay, and let's see if we go to our project here. Okay, so it does recognize it as an action, which is cool. So now what we need to do is actually test this out. In a build, so I think what I'm going to do is just try to do it within this repo just to see what happens. So we'll say, I'm going to come back to my code here and pull my updates. And I'm going to create a workflow that just debugs. So what I'll do, I'll make their .github Workflows. And there's two ways I can trigger this. One is with a manual run. Or one is with a dispatch, repository dispatch, which I should be able to trigger using a curl request. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is work for that one. And let's create an action here. Name debug on repository dispatch. Actually, that wouldn't work because I'd have to do a release. So let's do on release. Let's use our own docs for this. We'll just say on release. Or maybe I should do on release, release and pre-release. No, we'll just do all of them. And we'll come down here and we'll say jobs. Debug runs on Ubuntu latest. And we'll say, you probably don't need the strategy matrix stuff right now. Steps. I probably need to publish this first. Or I wonder if I don't use @ anything, if it'll work. Actually, probably don't even need to do this. But this should equal tag on this first run, so, or latest, sorry, if everything is right. So what we'll do, git add this only works on release. So I will probably have to merge this. So yeah, there are no actions yet. Okay, I drafted a release. Forgot to do my windows again. And here's what we get. Let's see what we got. Okay, apparently that does not work. Okay, so you actually need the @ref. Well, that's good to know. Forgetting to switch screens. I'm gonna probably pause the stream here and try out that scene switcher thing. Anyway, all I did is I came in here and I added the @master. So the syntax says that I need an @ref, and I'm pretty sure that I can use branches as refs. And added that, pushed it up. So I'll come back. Well, that's great. So I need to rebase. I'm just going to do this. Okay, so I'll come in here, I'll add master. Whoop. I guess I am really getting messed up. I'm a little hungry. Dash update usage syntax get push. So I'm gonna go merge this. And in order to test this out, I actually have to do another release. So let's check out our workflows. This is running. It immediately failed before, so this is positive. It ran 3 times. That's interesting. Let's see our log here. Module not found, so we've got a problem here where we're doing image tagger. Yeah, I need to rename this folder. So I'm going to come over here, remove this from my workspace. And then I'm actually going to change it. And I'm going to add that back. And I'm actually probably going to have to rebuild here. Let's see. Doesn't look like that changes anything, which is weird. I have got to update these URLs. fix this as well. So what I'm going to do is create a dependency bundle that is, I'm going to force it to only be production dependencies. And I think it's maybe production is the flag that you use. Okay, we'll just use the production flag. So we'll say npm I dash dash. So make sure that node modules is deleted. So we're only installing production dependencies here. And then we'll say ncc build index.js. So I'm going to push this, and now I'm going to merge it and create another debug release. Hey, debug completed. All right. And here's what we got. Okay, so this is probably a good place to take a break. So I'm going to grab something to eat and try to set up that OBS plugin for better screen switching so that I don't constantly have you looking at the wrong thing. Anyway, when we come back, we'll be taking a look at here's this payload that we got, and then how to grab what we need out of that payload to match the intent from the documentation. And this did not give us what we wanted. So that should have been oh, that's because I'd actually have to use the debug 3 release, because that's where I changed that output finally. So that actually makes sense. So when we come back, we'll start working on that, and I'll probably try to figure out a better way to test this, but we'll actually start using the Semver parser there as well. So I'll probably be back in 30 minutes or so.